Let me tell you a secret. The world doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care about your struggles. And it doesn't care about your explanations. The world only sees one thing: results. Steve Jobs understood this better than anyone. And today, we're going to unlock one of his darkest power lessons. Focus on your career and let success speak. You know, people waste so much energy trying to prove themselves. They argue, they defend, they try to convince others that what they're doing matters. But here's the truth: when you're constantly talking, constantly explaining, you're already losing. Because real success doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Real success whispers. It moves quietly until one day the world can't ignore it anymore. Steve Jobs understood this better than most. In his early days, he was ridiculed for being eccentric, for being obsessive, for demanding perfection from as small as the curve of a font or the color of a button. People told him he was wasting time on things that didn't matter. They laughed behind his back. They whispered that he was arrogant, impossible to work with, and even delusional. And yet, he didn't stand on a stage and defend himself. He didn't fight those voices with words. He fought them with his work. He stayed quiet, focused, relentless. And then one day, the same people who dismissed him were holding an iPhone in their hands, realizing he had changed the world. That's the lesson. Silence is louder than words. You don't need to prove people wrong by arguing. You prove them wrong by creating. You don't need to explain your worth. You demonstrate it by what you build, by what you deliver, by what you become. Think about it. Most people spend their lives posting their plans, defending their dreams, seeking validation before they've achieved anything. They want applause before they've earned it. But Steve Jobs knew applause only means something when it follows silence. When you've poured years into something and let it speak for itself. That's when people listen. That's when your work has power. Do you know why silence is powerful? Because it makes your results undeniable. When you're silent, you're not giving anyone the chance to argue with you. You're not inviting their doubts into your head. You're too busy building. You're too focused on creating something that will speak on its own. And when it finally appears, when your product, your career, your masterpiece steps into the world, people can't dismiss it. They can't argue with results that are right in front of their eyes. Jobs didn't go around telling everyone he would change the way humans interact with technology. He didn't sit on panels explaining why his vision was superior. He stayed in the lab, he stayed in the workshop, he obsessed with his team, and he worked in silence. And when the Macintosh appeared, when the iPod appeared, when the iPhone appeared, it was too late for anyone to laugh. The silence had already spoken. And here's the part that most people don't realize: a silence isn't passive. It's active. It's the grind, the sleepless nights, the countless failures no one sees. It's the courage to stay the course, even when no one believes in you. It's the discipline to let go of the need for recognition and focus only on execution. That silence becomes your weapon. It protects you from the noise of the world. It forces you to trust your vision. There's a reason why Steve Jobs used to say, "Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice." He meant it literally. The world is loud. Everyone has an opinion about your path, your ideas, your career. If you try to answer all of them, you'll drown in arguments. But if you go silent, if you retreat into your work, you'll rise above that noise. And the moment your results emerge, the noise dies on its own. Imagine your own life right now. How much energy are you wasting trying to prove yourself? How many hours do you spend defending your dreams to people who will never understand them? How often do you explain why you're different instead of showing them with action? Every word you waste is energy taken away from building. Every defense is a distraction from your mission. Jobs was rejected, ridiculed, and even fired from the company he created. But notice what he did. He didn't waste time writing essays about how unfair it was. He didn't give speeches attacking those who doubted him. He went quiet. He went back to building. And from that silence came NXT, came Pixar, and eventually came the rebirth of Apple itself. His silence was not weakness. It was strength. It was louder than any defense could ever be. You want to know how to make people listen? Stop talking. Start building. Let your silence accumulate into something so undeniable that when it speaks, no one can ignore it. That's the darkest power most people overlook. The power of staying quiet while the world underestimates you, then emerging with something so extraordinary that their doubts turn into applause. You know what stops most people from building the life they want? It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of opportunity. It's not even bad luck, it's opinions. The opinions of their family, their friends, their co-workers, and even strangers on the internet. People spend their entire lives imprisoned by what others think of them. They sacrifice their own career to fit into someone else's version of success. But Steve Jobs, he was different. He realized early on that opinions are noise and careers are signals. He chose to focus on the signal. He chose career over opinions. When Jobs was starting out, everyone had an opinion about him. They said he wasn't smart enough, not stable enough, too young to run a company. They told him he was wasting his time in his garage, that building personal computers was a fantasy. Even when Apple started growing, the opinions didn't stop. They said his ideas were impractical, his design obsession unnecessary, his leadership impossible to tolerate. Everywhere he turned, someone had something to say. But the key is this: he didn't live for their approval. He lived for his work. He put his career above their judgments, above their laughter, above their doubts. Think about it. Every revolutionary idea starts as a target of mockery. When Jobs insisted that design mattered just as much as function, people thought he was crazy. Computers were supposed to be machines, not pieces of art. But he wasn't listening. He wasn't waiting for consensus. He wasn't waiting for permission. He built what he believed in. And years later, the very same critics lined up to buy the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone. Opinions faded, but his career, his work, his results, those lasted. Here's the problem: too many of us get caught up in opinions. We let them guide us like chains around our ankles. Someone says we're not ready, so we stop. Someone says our dream is unrealistic, so we shrink. Someone laughs, and we fold. But Jobs understood something powerful. Opinions are temporary. They shift, they fade, they disappear. But your career, your legacy, the thing you build, that's permanent. That's what outlives the noise. When Jobs was forced out of Apple in 1985, the world was quick to write him off. The media said he was finished. Executives in Silicon Valley whispered that he was too difficult, too stubborn, too much of a perfectionist to ever succeed again. If he had listened, if he had let those opinions shape him, his story would have ended there. But he didn't. He chose career over opinions. He poured himself into NXT, into Pixar. He built. And when he came back to Apple over a decade later, he didn't just revive the company. He reinvented the entire industry. That's the message here. If you want to achieve something extraordinary, you cannot afford to live for other people's voices. Because the truth is, no matter what you do, people will talk. If you succeed, they'll criticize you. If you fail, they'll laugh at you. If you play it safe, they'll call you boring. If you take risks, they'll call you reckless. There is no winning game when you live for opinions. The only winning game is to live for your career, your craft, your vision. Jobs once said, "Your time is limited. So don't waste it living someone else's life. And he meant every word. He knew that every second spent worrying about what others thought was a second stolen from the work that mattered. That's why he was ruthless about focus, ruthless about saying no to distractions, ruthless about ignoring voices that didn't align with his vision. That's not arrogance, that's clarity. That's the discipline to choose your career over their chatter. Now picture your own path. Imagine how much further you'd be if you stopped explaining yourself to everyone. Imagine where your energy would go if you stopped defending your dreams and simply built them. How much time are you wasting trying to gain approval from people who will forget you tomorrow? Opinions won't pay your bills. Opinions won't build your company. Opinions won't leave a legacy behind your name. Only your work will. Jobs proved it with every step he took. He didn't wait for people to understand him. He didn't wait for people to agree with him. He moved forward. He built anyway. And that's why, decades later, we remember the man who focused on his career, not the thousands of voices that tried to hold him back. There's a word people are afraid of: obsession. They treat it like it's a flaw, like it's dangerous, like it's unhealthy. But let me tell you something. Every great legacy in history was born out of obsession. Every breakthrough, every invention, every revolution came from someone who refused to treat their vision like a hobby. They lived it, they breathed it, they gave their entire being to it. That's the truth people don't want to admit. Greatness doesn't come from balance. It comes from obsession. And Steve Jobs embodied that truth. Jobs wasn't interested in being average. He wasn't interested in doing just enough to get by. He obsessed over details most people wouldn't even notice. He cared about the way a computer looked on the inside, even though no customer would ever open it. He demanded perfection from the curve of a screen, from the animation of an icon, from the feel of a button. People around him thought it was madness, but he saw it as a necessity, because he understood something simple but profound. The legacy you leave is the sum of your obsessions. Think about it. What do people remember you for? Not for the things you did casually, not for the things you treated as side projects. They remember you for the things you gave everything to. Jobs was obsessed with merging technology and art, with creating machines that felt human, personal, almost alive. That obsession didn't just create products, it created experiences. It made Apple more than a company. It made it a cultural force. And here's the secret: obsession is uncomfortable. It pushes you to work when others sleep. It makes you restless when others are satisfied. It keeps you awake at night, replaying the smallest detail in your mind until you get it right. Most people run from that feeling. They think it means something is wrong, but Jobs leaned into it. He believed that if something mattered enough to keep you awake, it was worth pursuing until perfection. People called him difficult. They said he was impossible to work with. But what they didn't see was that obsession creates standards. It forces everyone around you to rise to a higher level. It doesn't accept good enough. It doesn't settle for mediocrity. That's why people who worked with Jobs, even if they found him challenging, admitted years later that he pushed them to do the best work of their lives. His obsession didn't just build his legacy, it ignited theirs. And isn't that what legacy is about? Not just what you achieve, but what you inspire in others. When you're obsessed with your craft, your energy is contagious. People may resist it at first, but eventually they see the results. They see the beauty of what obsession can create. And suddenly, they're willing to follow you into the fire because they realize you're building something that will outlive all of you. Look at the products that came out of his obsession: the Macintosh, the iPod, the iPhone. Each of them wasn't just functional, they were transformational. They reshaped industries, redefined culture, and altered the way billions of people live their daily lives. That doesn't happen by treating your work like a 9 to 5. That happens when your work consumes you, when you can't stop thinking about it, when you demand more from yourself than anyone else ever could. People like to preach about balance. And yes, there's wisdom in rest, in recovery, but balance doesn't build legacies. Obsession does. Jobs didn't leave behind a balanced life. He left behind a world forever changed by what he created. And that's why we remember him. That's why his name still carries weight long after he's gone. Because obsession, when it's directed towards something meaningful, outlives you. It plants seeds that grow into forests you'll never walk through, but others will. So ask yourself, what are you obsessed with? What keeps you awake at night? What detail, what dream, what idea refuses to leave your mind? That's the clue. That's the compass pointing you toward your legacy. Don't run from it. Don't silence it. Lean into it. Because obsession, when harnessed, is the fire that forges greatness. Jobs proved it. He didn't just build products, he built symbols. He didn't just chase profits, he chased perfection. And while the world remembers him for his success, the truth is, his success was only the surface. Underneath it was the relentless, burning obsession that never let him settle, never let him compromise, never let him stop. Rejection, it's the word people fear the most. The moment someone tells you no, the moment a door slams in your face, the moment the world decides you're not good enough, most people crumble. They let rejection define them. They carry it like a weight, proof that they were never meant to succeed. But Steve Jobs turned rejection into something else. He transformed it into fuel. He discovered that rejection wasn't the end of the road. It was the fire that could propel him forward. That was his darkest power. Jobs was rejected countless times before anyone knew his name. He applied for jobs and got turned down again and again. He pitched ideas that people laughed at. Banks refused to fund him. Even when he built Apple, even when his vision was already shaping the industry, rejection still followed him. The most brutal rejection came in 1985, when the very company he founded, the company he gave his heart and soul to, pushed him out, fired, dismissed, cast aside by people who didn't believe in him anymore. Imagine the humiliation. Imagine the pain. Most people would have disappeared after that. Most people would have called it quits. But Jobs didn't. He didn't allow rejection to define him. He let it sharpen him. He let it fuel his hunger. Instead of drowning in bitterness, he went back to the one thing he always had, his drive to build. That rejection became the fuel for NXT, for Pixar, for the second chapter of Apple itself. Without that rejection, there would be no Toy Story. There would be no iMac. There would be no iPhone. The rejection that should have destroyed him ended up becoming the reason he built a legacy even greater than before. And that's the lesson. Rejection is not your enemy. It is your greatest weapon if you know how to use it. Every time someone rejects you, they're handing you energy. They're handing you fuel. You can choose to let it burn you down, or you can choose to let it ignite you. Jobs chose the second path. He realized that rejection doesn't take away your value. It only reveals who has the courage to keep going without approval. The darkest power of rejection is that it strips you bare. It removes the applause, the validation, the external comfort, and forces you to look inward. It makes you ask, do I still believe in myself when no one else does? If the answer is yes, then rejection becomes your strongest ally. It clears the path, it hardens your resolve, it eliminates the need for permission. That's why rejection is so powerful. It teaches you to stop living for acceptance and start living for the mission. Jobs didn't wallow in self-pity. He didn't write angry letters about how unfair it was. He went quiet, he worked, he built. And when he returned to Apple 12 years later, he didn't just come back as the same man. He came back transformed, stronger, sharper, more dangerous, because rejection had forced him to evolve. That's the darkest power people overlook. Rejection is not a wall. It's a forge. It burns away the weak parts of you, leaving only the steel. Think about your own life. How many times have you let rejection stop you? How many dreams have you abandoned because someone told you no? How many times have you mistaken someone else's disbelief as proof that you weren't capable? That's the mistake. Rejection isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of someone else's vision. And if their vision is too small to see your potential, that's not your problem. Your job is to keep going, to keep building, to let their rejection become the fire under your feet. Jobs once said, "I didn't see it then, but getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to me." He could only say that because he turned rejection into drive. He used it to rebuild himself, to rediscover his passion, to double down on his vision. What should have been the darkest moment of his life became the foundation for the greatest comeback in business history. That's not luck. That's a choice. The choice to use rejection as energy instead of poison. So the next time you're rejected, the next time someone slams the door in your face, remember this: you've just been given fuel. You've just been handed power. You can let it crush you, or you can let it carve you into something greater. Jobs chose the second path, and it's why his legacy still speaks today. So, what do we learn from all of this? Silence is louder than words. Don't waste your life proving yourself to doubters. Let your work, your results, your career speak for you. Put your career above opinions, because opinions will fade, but the legacy you build will remain. Obsess over your craft, because it's only through obsession that something timeless is created. And when rejection comes, and it will, don't run from it. Let it harden you, sharpen you, drive you, until the same rejection that tried to bury you becomes the very reason you rise. Steve Jobs lived all of these lessons. He wasn't perfect. He was flawed, he was criticized, he was rejected. But he was relentless. He stayed silent when others demanded explanations. He ignored opinions when they tried to box him in. He embraced obsession when the world told him to relax. And he used rejection as the darkest power to fuel his greatest victories. That is why his name is still spoken today, not just as a man who built products, but as a man who built a legacy. And now the question is, what about you? Will you spend your life defending yourself to people who don't matter? Or will you let success speak? Will you shrink under rejection, or will you turn it into fuel? Will you chase balance, or will you embrace the obsession that builds greatness? The choice is in your hands. The world doesn't need more explanations. It needs results. It doesn't need more words. It needs action. It doesn't need more dreamers. It needs builders. Because in the end, your silence, your focus, your obsession, your resilience in the face of rejection, those will speak louder than anything you could ever say. In this painting, Steve Jobs stands in the center of a dimly lit Renaissance-style hall, his figure illuminated by a single divine light from above. Around him are shadowy crowds of critics and doubters, their mouths wide open, frozen mid-speech, as if shouting endlessly. Yet Jobs is calm, holding in his hands a glowing, unfinished Apple computer, its light silencing the chaos around him. His expression is serene, almost saint-like, as though he knows something the others cannot see. The floor beneath him is scattered with broken scrolls and books, symbolizing wasted words and arguments. The silence surrounding his body is painted as an aura of gold, like the halo of a medieval saint. In the background, faintly, a futuristic skyline emerges, hinting at the iPhone and iMac yet to come. The contrast between the noisy crowd and Jobs' quiet figure captures the eternal power of silence speaking louder than words. Here, Jobs is painted as a medieval knight, not in steel armor, but draped in a cloak stitched from glowing circuit boards and calligraphic letters. He walks a long path across a cracked desert landscape, while faceless figures line the sides, pointing, laughing, and holding scrolls filled with harsh judgments. Their faces are exaggerated like grotesque masks, symbolizing the distortion of opinions. Jobs does not look at them. Instead, his eyes are fixed on a glowing tower in the distance, symbolizing his career and legacy. Above him, the sky shifts between storm clouds and a radiant dawn, representing the constant battle between doubt and vision. His bare feet on the burning sand symbolize sacrifice and pain, but his stride is unbroken. The painting has a Renaissance structure, but the colors blend into abstract swirls that mirror noise trying to invade his path. His body glows faintly, showing that career is the true north, stronger than any opinion. Steve Jobs appears here like a Renaissance craftsman, seated at a long wooden table in a candlelit workshop. Around him, scattered manuscripts, tools, and half-built machines fill the room, resembling a fusion between Da Vinci's inventions and modern Apple devices. His hands grip a glowing orb that transforms into an iPhone, yet its edges still dissolve into sketches, showing his obsession with the unfinished becoming perfect. Behind him are ghostly murals of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, blending art and technology, as if divine inspiration is guiding his hands. His face is gaunt, intense, showing sleepless nights, yet his eyes burn with fire. The candlelight illuminates his obsession as holy, while outside the workshop window, shadows of ordinary workers pass by, indifferent, symbolizing the world's lack of understanding. The atmosphere is thick with reverence, showing that obsession is not madness. It is the very essence of legacy. This painting depicts Jobs alone, cast outside a grand marble palace that represents Apple. His figure is painted small in the foreground, hunched slightly, as corporate figures in dark robes shut the golden gates behind him. Yet instead of despair, his face carries determination, his hands gripping blueprints that glow with fairy red light. Around his feet, the ground cracks open, and from the fissures rise surreal flames that twist into shapes of Pixar's characters and futuristic Apple devices, symbolizing the birth of new ideas from rejection. The sky is stormy, heavy with rejection, yet a hidden beam of light breaks through, falling directly on Jobs as if destiny itself is guiding him. His clothes are ragged, almost monk-like, but his aura is radiant, showing that he carries power even in exile. The brushwork turns abstract around the edges, showing chaos, but his figure is sharply detailed, symbolizing clarity born from rejection. In this final masterpiece, Jobs is painted seated on a throne, not of gold but of luminous glass and metal, resembling a fusion of Renaissance throne and futuristic Apple design. In his hands, he holds the iPhone like a holy relic, its glow illuminating the faces of billions, painted as ghostly silhouettes in the background, each connected by threads of light. The throne room is cathedral-like, with stained glass windows that depict the Macintosh, the iPod, the iPhone, as though they are sacred icons. His expression is calm, reflective, not triumphant, showing that his legacy speaks louder than he ever could. Around him, fallen scrolls, broken chains, and shattered masks symbolize silenced opinions, rejection, and doubt. The painting style blends Renaissance grandeur with abstract strokes of light that spread beyond the canvas, symbolizing his influence extending far beyond time. His figure is immortalized here not as a king, but as a creator whose silence, obsession, and resilience became his eternal voice.